Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Facebook Live here. Meet the podcasters. I'm Diane Ray from MindBodySpirit.fm. And people who are familiar with our network may realize that we have some incredible mediums. We have angel people. We have all kinds of people that help you with whatever is going on in your life. And that's one of our goals, is to provide podcasts that help and inspire people. So today I'm really excited about the conversation because aging isn't really a subject that a lot of people like to talk about, but it's something that we're all going to experience. I mean, I'm aging rapidly as we speak. I've got a birthday coming up next month. So it's just something that, we get a little weird about, but it's very important that we talk about it. And there's really no manual to prepare for aging, what's going to happen, medical care, and enjoying life. So today we're going to talk to Jacqui Clark, and she's a certified senior advisor and an aging expert who guides us through the complex topics and things that we face as we get older. And her podcast is amazing. It's called Get Ready for Better Aging. And she's been getting some incredible feedback from listeners because this topic and this information is so important. So I want to welcome Jacqui to the Facebook Live today. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Diane. And thank you for the warm welcome. It's been such an honor to be on the Mind, Body, Spirit podcast. It's just been such a great experience.
It's been a journey, and things are just going to keep getting better, as things roll along, because you're a new podcaster. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I want to let people know that you made a career pivot, from working in PR for Hay House Publishing, which is where we first met in our Hay House days. And you
Indeed.
made quite a switch to doing this job that you're really passionate about. So I just wanted to find out how you made that switch from PR at a publishing house to aging services.
Well, it's interesting. It was about 11 years ago, and my mom was in the middle of a 12-year journey with dementia. And my dad, also, he had cancer. They, at the time, told him terminal cancer, but he decided not to listen to them and lasted another 11 years. But it was just, I was at a time where I was looking for something different, and I had my parents to care for, think about. And this whole idea of helping seniors find assisted living, find memory care, figure out how to age in place really appealed to me. So I kind of jumped in with 2 feet. It landed me where I am today. And the rest is history. I mean, there was a whole decade of history, but we only have so much time on a show. So
Right.
but
It's been quite the journey.
yeah, it is. It's been a wonderful opportunity to continue to do something I'm very passionate about, helping people age well, live well, and quite frankly, not a fun subject to talk about, but also to die well, to pass well. And we're all going there every second. We are getting to the end, and it doesn't have to be depressing, and it doesn't have to be a bad experience, even in the worst situations of diagnosis and disease and everything else in between.
Well, I'm so happy that you decided to turn all of your knowledge that you've accumulated into a podcast. And when you first came to us and we were talking about the concept, I just loved it. And Tina did, my business partner in MindBodySpirit.fm, because we both feel that this is so important. And I've seen, personally, where I had a friend that never really talked with her mother about her, her needs, what her wishes were, towards the end of her life. And then when that finally happened, she was just totally shattered, just at a loss. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like you said, you can have a much better experience for your family and your loved ones. So, I mean, you can say your podcast really helps two people, like people that are caring for loved ones as they're aging, and then also people planning for their own aging journey. So let's talk about those people that are caring for their parents first, because so many of us are in that situation. I mean, I have friends that are dealing with that as well. I mean, what are the kinds of questions that people ask you the most, that are trying to find, where do I go? What do I do to help my mother or father? Do they need a facility? Do they need help? What are some of the things you talk about on the podcast that you share on that?
So, in regards to the podcast, we try to delve into a single subject really deeply and just kind of not explore the obvious, because there's a lot of obvious sound bites. You got to sign up for Medicare, but nobody talks about the challenges of signing up or using it, or why it's important to pick the right type of Medicare. So we go really deep into single subjects each time, and I think that's what's really been attractive to people, because we all know that the 30-second soundbite of aging, but we need to know the nitty-gritties that sometimes we kind of shy away from. I think every time I get a client, and it's usually an adult child, sometimes it's the spouse of someone going through illness, dementia, Parkinson's, whatever it is. I think before the questions, what I usually tackle is, why did you call me? There's always a reason, and it's usually they're burnt out, they don't know what to do, there's a challenge. So I probably spend 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60 minutes just trying to find out what's going on, trying to kind of give them a little bit of support of, it's okay, I'm here, we're going to figure this out, whatever it is, financial, assistant living, Medicare, whatever it is. And I'm going to help you. And it's probably the first time that they're talking to somebody that can find an answer for every challenge they're having. And that is the key to being a senior care advisor, is having the heart and the expertise to be able to dive in and figure out, what does this person need? And once I figure that out, then we delve into their questions. And the questions are pretty simple. How much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? And then I help them understand care. How is care managed? How is the type of care their loved one needs? Where can they go? How do they access it? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we're taking off from there. And it's kind of a long process. It's not like, I talk to them 20 minutes and they hang up and now they have it figured out. I guide them. We schedule appointments. I go with them. I figure out if they're going to stay at home, how's it going to look? Sometimes it's transportation. Sometimes it's resources that they don't know how to access, be it VA. It's a laundry list, and we kind of get through it. And that's what we do when it's that time.
And I'm sure every situation is unique, right?
Yes.
So
One
there's
side.
different
Yeah.
challenges, and people must be so relieved, because I'm sure by the time they're making that call, maybe they've never even spoken about this to anybody or shared their fears. So it's got to be such a relief to talk to somebody.
It is. It's sort of a club that you become part of that you never wanted to be part of. And a lot of times, especially if you're a younger adult children going through it, like I was pretty young when my parents were going through, their end of life stuff. And all my friends' parents were still showing up to my kids' soccer games. And my parents couldn't even show up for Grandparents' Day because they had too many things going on. My mom's dementia. My kids didn't really want to be around it. And it's sort of like, you don't know, nobody can understand what you're going through unless you're going through it. So when someone comes to me and says, yeah, my mom had dementia for 12 years. Yeah, my dad had terminal cancer, heart disease, transportation, resources were tough. And they feel like somebody can understand what they're going through. That's a huge relief, because even a doctor doesn't understand how people live with diseases. They understand how to diagnose or treat, but not how to live with it day to day, how to care for parents that have a lot of challenges or a lot of just time. It's a time suck sometimes, especially if you're working, you have kids, spouse obligations, whatever it is. It's challenging.
Yes, there's a lot of people in that situation. They call it the sandwich generation,
Yes.
right?
And we're getting
Dealing with,
squished.
we're getting squished. We're dealing with elderly parents. And if you
Mhm.
have young kids or kids still in school at home, the pressure is just unbelievable. And I've experienced both. My father had dementia and Alzheimer's, and my mother passed from colon cancer. Both
Yeah.
of those experiences are horrible in their own right. But both of them have different challenges. And especially when you're dealing with, dementia and memory care and Alzheimer's, and you said like your daughters were afraid, or maybe
Embarrassed sometimes. Yeah.
uncomfortable, to
Yeah.
be around that. And those are all feelings that come up when you're dealing with that kind of situation. And I'm
Right.
just curious, have you had a lot of people recently, worried about the changes in Medicare and Social Security, and like every day in the news, our heads are kind of spinning, whiplash with what's going on. So there's got to be a lot of concern there.
It's really interesting because over the last 11 years, it's about every year, Medicare actually does changes, rules, regulations, donut holes go away, what's covered, what's not. And because it's ever changing, I think it's really important to understand what's going on at the time. And that also it's really smart to plan. Medicare is a great example. I'm glad you brought it up. As you approach 65, I have, friends, people, family, colleagues coming to me saying, "Hey, I'm 63, I'm 64. It's almost that time." It's really important to understand the why you should use an expert when choosing Medicare. Picking the cheapest plan, for instance, just because you're super healthy at 65 isn't always the best solution, because you're not really picking the plan for when you're healthy. You're picking the plan for when you're most sick and you need it. And as you said, Medicare changes almost every year. So you should get a checkup. Go see your local expert. What's changed? What's changed in mind? Like, if you have an unfortunate diagnosis, let's say of Parkinson's, the medications can be really expensive. You want to look and say, "Hey, do my medications, are they still covered in the new plan or the plan I currently have, or do I need to make some adjustments?" So it's about staying relaxed and learning to pivot. And if you don't understand how to pivot or where to pivot, to seek an expert in this field. There's a lot of us out there, and which kind of brings to the other side of the show that you had asked me about. So I work with the adult kids, but I also worked with, I would say, people 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s who are thinking, "Hey, I don't want to do it the way my parents did," or "I do want to do it the way my parents did. My parents were completely, if someone says my parents were so financially set, they bought long-term care, they were super healthy, they did everything right. I kind of think I need to follow their track." And so that's another motivation for kind of just being aware of living, aging well, what we put into our bodies, our mind, our body, our spirit. I see that some of the most successful aging is about healthy mind, healthy body, and some kind of spirituality. And of course, what I call great community, great relationships, great close friends, great family members. I mean, that is super important. For it's not just, eat well, because you can eat well, be really healthy, and be completely alone and die of loneliness, which we say all the time. So there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, they say that that's the new epidemic now. Loneliness is the new
Yeah.
epidemic. And it's so great you're bringing these subjects up on the podcast and sharing people's stories, because I love story. And I think we learn so much from that, from other people's experiences. And I'm glad you brought up like what our choices are going to be, because personally, like my mother was very organized. And when my father passed, she had everything written down, everything was on a
So lucky.
checklist. I know, and I realized I'm so lucky. She had everything buttoned up, and then I've seen other friends where I had another friend that it took her 2 years just to empty out her father's garage, plus she had all the other storage units that he had for hiding his hoarding habit, you know?
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah. That's a big
and those
thing.
are things you find out, after the fact, and it was like a whole 2-year process just to kind of go through that. First, you have to find the will, in amidst all the junk, and stuff. So there's all these different issues that come up. And you're right, we don't wanna think about it, do we? We don't wanna imagine that
No.
that day will come, you know?
It's almost like cleaning out a garage that you can't get through. Nobody, you just keep shutting the door, but then eventually you just dive in, you get it done, and there's this great sense of relief that you now have space that you can find things, you can walk through. When you get when you get your affairs in order, life becomes a little happier, because you know that your family's taken care of, your wishes are going to be carried out. You've done the best that you can. Look, we don't have a crystal ball. Sometimes we do everything right and it still goes sideways, but it's certainly much easier to navigate the sideways when you have a plan ahead of you.
Right. And I'm thinking of myself like, I don't even have a will yet. I should probably,
Diane,
I know I
I'm
need to get that
shocked.
together.
I
Not
can
like I
help
have
you.
these, you can definitely,
I
and
got
not
great
like I have
people.
these great riches that I can leave people, but just things that you want. Like, do you want cremation or not? Sometimes at the end of life, that can cause a big issue where a family member or the family is, say, against it, but you really
That's
want
what you
that,
want. So
that process.
you bring up a great example, and I've come across this often. a will is not because you have a gazillion dollars. A will is about telling people what you want. And you're right. Cremation, burial. Where do you want to be rest? Where do you want to be sprinkled to the great beyond? What kind of service? You know, you may not have millions of valuable artifacts in your home, but there are things your family members will fight over. A photo album from the 1960s can be a bitter, bitter argument amongst siblings. So, there are, when I get people calling me and they're like, oh, my sister and I were not on the same page. And, she's trying to do this and I'm trying to do that. Sometimes there's really easy solutions. Like, I've had where someone said, we're fighting over the photo album. I'm like, did you know that you can take your iPhone or any other camera because they have an amazing lens? You can take a better picture of that 1960s picture, tweak it, share it. Everyone's happy. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. So
Right?
solved.
Something so simple. Yeah,
Yeah.
problem solved.
Huge fight. I mean, bitter, bitter, bitter fights over the silliest, vase that, or the pot or the glass container that your mom always made jello in. There's going to be a fight. So having your last wishes and even telling your family, that's another thing, is don't keep it a secret. Let them know right ahead, the antique piano is going to your sister and you're not getting it. So there is no surprises in the end. It's really important.
It is. That's such good advice. And as you've been working through the topics on the podcast and things that you want to share, is there a story that stands out that was really heartwarming that you were happy to share and just get that information out?
Um, I would say my favorite podcast yet has been the one we just did. It was with a caregiver. Her name is June. And I knew her for 4 years through a mutual friend, and I helped her. She was planning on keeping her husband home the entire time, but it got very challenging. And she was good enough to just really let me pick her brain and share with everyone her experience of being a caregiver. You know, caregivers are angels. However, people put them up on pedestal that they're perfect, and they're not. We know it. And I think that's one of the hardest thing about being a caregiver. Everyone tells you, oh, you're an angel, you're amazing. And then you feel guilty because you're like, oh, I yelled at my mom because I couldn't take her anymore. Her authenticity about her frustrations, and on some days, while she always loved her husband, there was days she had a hard time liking him, was it was information she shared that help somebody else feel less guilty that day. And it's those kind of conversations, those honest conversations, that I think is the value. So I think that's my favorite podcast to date. We have so many great ones. But in terms of of all the clients I've ever worked with, I mean, there's so many heartwarmings, but there's been this one lady who has just stuck with me for the last year and a half that I just can't stop thinking about. Um, so we'll call her Helen. You know, Helen came to me because she was looking for a community, assistant living for her and her husband. And when she called me, she was full of fire, and she's a total general. And I loved her from the start. I mean, like, she's my kind of lady. She knew what she wanted. She was determined to get it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to get this for you, And she worked she worked me over good. I always say, I mean, she had me jump in, making sure she got everything. She wanted something very difficult, and that was her husband had a formal diagnosis of dementia. And traditionally in California, that means you have to go to memory care. It's very hard to live in assisted living. There's a handful that have something called transitional. She wanted to live with her husband in assisted living. That can be difficult to get. So we got it. We found something. But as I said, she also wanted a 2-bedroom, which it's hard to come by. And she had a big laundry list. And so we checked it all off, but she had to get on a wait list. So, and I had seen her the year that we were looking, but then she was on a wait list that ended up lasting a year, and we would text and call, and is it ready, and all this stuff. And again, she was a real firecracker. I really enjoyed her. So a year later, her turn came up, super excited, and I ended up meeting her, and I hadn't seen her in a year. And when I saw her, I realized really quickly something was wrong. And there was nothing wrong with her the year before. No illnesses, no diseases. The whole time we talked, she did, and I always asked her, "How are you doing?" I didn't want her to have caregiver burnout. And she said, "I'm fine. I'm fine. Nothing wrong with me." And she was right. Nothing was wrong with her. But the one thing we talked a lot about was she was super worried how she was going to live without her husband. And she goes, she saw him deteriorating. We talked a lot about what it was going to look like, being that I had gone through with my mom. And we had really honest conversations about how hard it was going to be for her husband to pass before her, years and years, maybe even a decade before. So fast forward, I see her. She doesn't look so great. I'm really concerned. We move her in, and 2 weeks later, she's living in the community finally. And then I get a call that she passed. And that was
Wow.
just, it was just so heartbreaking. She had a very unfortunate, rapid form of cancer that struck her. And, it just wasn't caught early enough. And maybe you never can. We never know these things. But not in a million years did I ever think she was going to go first. Uh, Same with Helen. Helen never thought, no way am I the first one to go. And it just reminded me that we just don't know. And I know it sounds very cliche, but we shouldn't wait to do our bucket list. We should remember that you can't take it with you. We should remember that the most valuable thing in life is the experiences we have, especially when they're with family and loved ones. I remember when her son texted me saying, because I had texted her saying, "Hey, how's it going? When I'm going to come by, we're gonna have a drink or something fun." We were fun, her and I, and the text was replied to by her son, and he told me, and I just remember feeling just this deep, deep, overwhelming sadness. There was tears, of course, and I was thinking, it was a privilege to know Helen. She taught me patience. She showed me a deep love of a spouse that few have. I mean, so valuable. Sacrifice. She sacrificed a lot in her life. And in the end, she showed me bravery, right to the end. So, I mean, even now I think about it and it's really hard, but it's those kind of stories that keep me, I should say, it's those kind of experiences that keep me in this business. I love doing it. And there's a lot of people to serve out there.
It's so important what you're doing. And she was an angel that touched you, and I'm sure you touched her life, and those are the things that stay with you. And
I
you're
hope
right, it's
so.
the experiences that are really important. And time is something that we can never get back. So you want to spend it with your friends and your family and your loved ones. Well, I am so excited that we're able to host the podcast and for you to be able to get this information out there. And there's more stories like that coming, and you've got more shows in the works that are on the way.
Indeed,
And
indeed.
yeah, and people can catch up if they go to mindbodyspirit.fm and check out your show, Get Ready for Better Aging. Click on there. You can follow on all the podcast platforms and make sure that you're not missing out on any stories. So I'm so glad we could spend some time today and share what you're doing. And I think it's so incredible and so important. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you
you,
so much
Diane.
for joining me today, Jacqui. And thank you everybody for watching.